Every Waitangi Day, our thoughts turn to our nation of Aotearoa and our ideals of partnership and our ideals of living up to those concepts in the treaty like rangatiratanga. And I think we're reminded every year that we always have so much more to learn of our own history. Over the summer in the car, Stephen and I listened to some of the RNZ series on the New Zealand wars that have been out for a while, some of them as early as 2017. They're the series by Nihi Ngarangi Forbes, and she does an amazing job of storytelling the story of some of those parts of the wars. And if you haven't ever listened to them, today it'd be a good day to listen to a couple. The series reminded me again of the need to know our history and to be aware also of our church's role in the lives of the settlers and Māori alike in the 19th century. There are many different versions of the stories of the missionaries and the early Māori evangelists, and I thought that RNZ series did a great job of prioritising the Māori voice while still understanding the complexities of the story of the missionaries and their place in our history. Last year, when I broke my ankle and had lots of time at home, followed by the lockdown, I spent some time reading and researching our own story of our land here, the land that the church sits on. I've been curious about that for a while, and I had a few weeks to kind of do some Google searching and talk to people on the phone and order some books. And I thought maybe today is a good day to share with you some of that story. Some of you may know some of this already, but some of it was new to me. On the 1st of November 1843, Bishop George Selwyn, the first bishop of New Zealand, was granted this land here on the corner of Hobson and Wellesley Place, as it was called. Granted the land by the Crown. The deed of grant says the land is to be used as a site for the erection of a church and chapel for the celebration of divine service according to the rites of the United Church of England and Ireland, as by law established, and to be devoted, when consecrated, to ecclesiastical purposes forever. Long-term view. Now the Crown, of course, had been gifted the land in the whole of central Auckland here by Ngāti Whātua only 3 years earlier in 1840, the year of the signing of the treaty. So Ngāti Whātua gifted the land for the central Auckland in 1840, and it was given to this plot was given to Bishop Selwyn in 1843. By then, the land of central Auckland had been divided up and sold, or in our case, given. The site for St Paul's in Simon Street, although it wasn't exactly quite that spot, and St Mary's, which became the cathedral, were also given to Bishop Selwyn at that time. He said in a letter that he wrote to England in 1842, "I have obtained an excellent site on the western ridge," that's this ridge, "on which I intend as soon as possible to build a wooden chapel and to lay the foundation of a church on a grand scale, to be proceeded with as funds can be obtained." So he was writing that in 1842, so obviously the negotiations were well underway, and it was official in 1843. By 1848, what they called a schoolroom had been built on the front, on the Hobson Street corner, but it's quite large from the pictures, and that had worship and Sunday school in it. So that was 1848, and by 1853 the parish was formally established, and the first vicar, Reverend Frederick Thatcher, was appointed. Now he was also an architect. He was the diocesan architect, and he immediately established a fund for the raising of money for a stone church, way back in 1853. But in the meantime, they built a very large wooden church, which was on the car park site, and that was opened in 1863. And the parsonage was built on the Federal Street corner. And I discovered a beautiful map of the first design of the layout of the land that's in a wonderful book about Frederick Thatcher by the late 18 Margaret Ellington, and you can see the land all sketched out. site of a village or a pub. The closest village was down the hill, roughly where St Patrick's Cathedral is now, and that was called Ngāwhānau Ātāko, and that was quite a village. Queen Street, of course, had the Waihoruchi stream flowing through it, and there were gardens at various points along the stream, and including down at the Aotea Centre, where the Aotea Centre is now, and on the slopes coming up towards us. So that would have been the nearest kind of site of activity, as far as we can tell, to us. The ridgeline, though, is thought to have been a walking track from Karangahape Road down to the harbour and back. If you can imagine it without the motorway and everything in the way, it would have been a sensible walking track down to the harbour. Now, once the settlement of Auckland began to grow, there would have been houses and shops around here, but not at the beginning. At the beginning, this site would have been very much on the edge of things. But Selwyn chose 3 prominent hilltops for his churches, and he expected the people to come up the hill to the beacon on the hill. Opposite us, where the Sky City Theatre is where Fort Liga was built, or partially built at least, in 1845, so just a couple of years after the land was acquired. Fort Liga was built in response to various fears related to the New Zealand Wars and the possible invasions of Auckland. But it seems that the fears actually weren't held that strongly because the fort was never finished. But it does show the kind of tensions and uncertainty that were present in Tamaki Makaurau in the 1840s. So what story, I wonder, can our land tell us? What can we imagine might have happened here before the coming of the settlers? This land has not passed through many hands over decades, like most of central Auckland. It hasn't been bought and sold. We can reach directly back in time to our ancestor Selwyn, and we can wonder about our other ancestors who walked the tracks past our doors and guarded the gardens just down the hill. What can we imagine about them? I don't know if any of you have had a chance yet to read Lucy McIntosh's wonderful new book called Shifting Grounds, Deep Histories of Tamaki Makaurau. I also recommend that. She's one of the staff at the museum, and she says in her book, places are not empty, fixed locations on a map, but rather can be analysed as sites of power, oppression, privilege, and exclusion. Each place has its own story to tell, its own unique story in the midst of all the other stories going on around. So what story can this land tell us of power, oppression, privilege, and exclusion? What story does this very European stone church tell us about the colonial claiming of land and the need to have a church that looked like England? We love our stones, our windows, the colour and the light. We love the arches and the shapes, and there's nothing wrong with that. But even in 1905, when this building opened, I wonder what our Ngāti Whātua ancestors would have thought of the solid permanence of this stonework, claiming this land forever, as the deed of grant promised. We're hoping that this year finally will be the year when we upgrade our gardens all around the church. I know I've said that quite a few times at the beginning of recent years, but you know, ever hopeful. And as we explore what we're going to do with our gardens in partnership with residents from the City Mission, we will still want to try and reach back into our past and tell the story of the land as it was in 1843 and earlier. What can we plant in our gardens that will tell that story? What kind of signage will we put up? What might we call the gardens? All kinds of things that we might be able to do to try and reach back 360 years since the wooden church next door was built. So perhaps from now till then, we'll be able to do some deep reflecting on our history and have some way of marking and celebrating those anniversaries. I know some of you have been reading the book Imagining Decolonisation, which we started with a book group last year, and we're going to catch that up again, maybe during Lent. And in that book, Moana Jackson says that he would like to replace the concept of decolonisation with an ethic instead of restoration. He says the building of new relationships and the telling of new stories begins with the identification and untelling of colonisation's past and present lives. Stories for and about transformation rely on honesty about the misremembered stories and the foresight to see where different stories might lead. That is the ethic of restoration. So what paths to restoration might we begin to walk down as we wonder about our land and its story? What new abundance might we find, like the overflowing nets of today's gospel reading? So many fish that the fishermen had to call for the other boats to come and help them. What call of Jesus might we follow as we think about our land and start a new relationship with our neighbours at home ground? What do we think about the relative wealth of our church over 180 years when our tikanga Māori partners still struggle to find stipends to pay more than a few clergy? These are some of the questions that will arise for us when we bring the gospel into conversation with our own history. So I look forward to discovering what further questions we might have as we give thanks for Aotearoa, as we give thanks for our imperfect partnership of cultures, and our ongoing call to live out the demands of the gospel in this land.